Hey guys, welcome to the Silver Report. Here we are, it's Thursday, April 6th, 2017. We have gold currently trading at $1,251.90. Silver's trading at $18.30. And let's get right into some of the economic factors that will be playing a part into the price of precious metals. Now we have some major news that is broken out, and it's among two different countries with two different problems. Now, what we saw in the past, we see that Venezuela's money supply has now increased 200%. And that was just in the year. Venezuela's money supply, it surged, its fastest rise since records began in 1940, putting it on track with what is likely the world's highest inflation. Since after a month-long hiatus from publication, the central bank said late on Friday the total amount of local currency in circulation, known as the M2 money supply, as of March 24th, was 13.3 trillion bolivars. That's 202.9% up from a year earlier. And so what we've seen, Venezuela is in a major crisis. Millions are struggling with food shortages. Inflation, it's thought to be in the triple digit. No official data is actually available on this. The exponential rise in M2, the sum of cash together with checking, savings, and other deposits, means an exponential rise in the amounts of currency circulating, coupled with a decline of output of goods and services that has accelerated inflation. And what we've seen, says that the inflation could have reached as high as 741% in the year to February. And so there's protests. There's protests in the streets. There's riots in the streets. There's also calls for the government to acquire more power. And there's also protests in another major country, in Greece. So there was thousands of protesters. They marched because the country is now lowering the pensions again for some of their older citizens. This one was not as violent as the farmers' protest and riots, but it means something. It's because most of them were walking with canes to hold themselves up. They're stripping away the money. And the reason I bring up both of these is because there's protests in both, but for two very different reasons. Now, Greece is suffering under the brutal rule of a central bank of Europe. They have had all of their money slipped away, and now their elected officials no longer have the ability to provide tax cuts, no longer have the ability to provide pensions for their workers that worked their whole lives and were promised it back before this catastrophe took place. And then there's Venezuela, also riots in the street. And so where did these two meet? Well, there's a major difference. Now, not too long ago, during the financial crisis, there was a big to-do where Venezuela wanted to bring their gold home. And they were parading it through the streets. They also did not want to be a part of the central banking cartel, and so they took their own finances. And so one being crushed and stripped away and slowly enslaved to the point where the citizens, all they can do is march in sorrow because they're older, they're trying to retire, and now they no longer have any money to live. And so they are in a slow fade away from what was their country. And now they also no longer have the ability to make their own laws, make their own rules. And now what happens to a country when you want to remove yourself under this iron fist of central bank control, like Venezuela, and make it public and make it known? We want our gold. We want to alter the shape of our economy. We no longer want to be controlled by this dictatorship, even though Venezuela is a dictatorship. But they wanted to have their own and not have it centrally controlled somewhere else outside of their country. And what you watch is a complete collapse of an economy. Now, another thing to note, there is now protests in riots that were taking place in Russia. Now, we know that Vladimir Putin is beloved. He's the John Wayne of Russia. He is beloved. He's kicked out these central banking cartels. And he has also instituted gold buying on like a man with a mission. They are devoting massive amounts of their country's income specifically to buying, hoarding, facilitating the use of transactions in gold. And also, protests show up in his country. A man who's got a 80% approval rating. When have we ever had a president with an approval rating that high? And yet the media lashes out at him, smashes him. We saw that the ruble had massive currency troubles, that they were having bank runs not too long ago. And what you see is the trouble that comes from being under central bank control, the damage that comes, that eventually your pensions disappear, eventually your elected officials can no longer leave the control of things like the European Union. Eventually people just become broken until every last penny is stripped away. But to stand up and for liberty and freedom, to be separate from their system, also involves much pain. These people have a lot more power than anybody could possibly conceive, and it will continue. And now we point to the United States, under the central bank control of a company that has been named the Federal Reserve, which slowly and steadily is breaking the currency in the United States. It is taking, and you don't think they take our taxes, do you? You don't think they take our taxes? What about the bailout? Do you understand what took place? Why people were upset? And that's what they were afraid of. People were upset and they were united. Left and right, they were in the street on Wall Street. They were there and they sent in controlled opposition to co-opt this enthusiasm, this energy of the people. We don't want you to take our money. And yet the money was given over to the Federal Reserve and the unlimited ability to quantitative ease. That's such a beautiful term they used. But to be able to print money and to give it to who? Did they give it to you? No, they gave it to central banks failing all around the world. Deutsche Bank was one of them. All of their central bank friends. So they give it to the banks, at which point the banks can lend it or loan it or do whatever they want with it, and it creates all of these asset bubbles. And now there is a very serious problem that is brewing as they have made a larger bubble. And so what happens whenever we suffer and our stock market crashes and we lose money? They print more money and give it to their own banks. This is a system that is controlling the world. And when you want to resist it, when you want to stand back, when you want, you see there's moves by the states to adopt silver and gold as currency. Do you understand? This may get ugly. This may get ugly. There were times in the past in which people attempted to be able to put America onto a silver standard. That when people attempted to limit the power of the Federal Reserve, and it always ends ugly. You see, the richest establishment in the history of the world, the central banking cartel, it will leave behind it bloodstains. Silver and gold, that's what this channel's about, because silver and gold is money. Even their own talking heads, they understand silver and gold is money. It can't be printed. It only whenever you give somebody a printer or a digital computer screen can it be controlled. But the point is, only it comes out similar to population growth of the ground. And so the levels of silver and gold is almost proportionate with the amount of people that enter into this world. So it's a key store of money. All over the world is taken as money. There's so many countries that are adopting its use as money. And this will be ugly. A lot of people, they seem to think that the Federal Reserve just has the people's best interest in mind, that these World Economic Forums and their universal basic income has the people's best interest in mind. But I really believe these people are lost and they don't really understand the great danger that we are really in is the fact that as gold and silver rises, it makes the Federal Reserve their stomach turn. And they begin to focus intensely on the price of gold and silver. And they begin to do unprecedented announcements, extra announcements. Not only was the Fed meetings release, where we told you we're going to murder the stock market enough, but they come out and say, well, we're going to do an extra speech. We're going to do anything to get headlines. We need our fear and iron fist all over the minds of all of the American people nonstop because they are afraid, because they see the price of gold and silver rising. They see the headlines. They see it's being talked about. And gold and silver is a definite threat to what they have been doing. All right, thank you guys for joining me here on the Silver Report. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe, like the videos, share the videos, get the word out. I thank you so much for stopping by. As always, stay safe.